Hey there, my name is Emily Beasley, and I'm a youth independent living specialist here at Able, South Carolina. I'm going to be talking about supporting your young adult through transition today. Transition, of course, being that time from childhood to adulthood where you're kind of in between because you're considered an adult, but you may still be working on some of those skills. And so I want to make sure to tell everybody that transition is going to look different for everybody. I'm going to be sharing a lot of my own life experiences today, but do remember that it's going to look different for everyone. You're going to need to try what works best for your family. And I'm just sharing some things that my parents have done and other adults in my life have done that have empowered me. And so hopefully you can get some tips on what you should do, maybe what you shouldn't do, and stuff like that. And as always, if you need any help with any of this stuff, you can contact Able South Carolina, and we'd be more than welcome to help with anything related to transition. So a little bit about me. So I am a person with multiple disabilities, two of which are autism spectrum disorder and ankylosing spondylitis. And I obviously was born with autism, but I wasn't diagnosed until I was 18, and I'll touch a little bit more on that later. The ankylosing spondylitis, I developed that when I was around 19. It's an autoimmune disease, and that's more of a physical disability, which hasn't impacted me too much. It did impact my college though, so I will be talking about that. I am 22 years old, and I have a bachelor's in business administration with a minor in management, and I'm currently working on my master's in counseling and rehabilitation at the University of South Carolina. In my free time, I like to do a lot of things, but one of the things that I really enjoy is doing triathlons. So I've done over the past 2 years about five. I have a couple more planned for this year. We'll see how that goes. With the ankylosing spondylitis, that can prevent me from doing them sometimes, but I have a lot of fun doing them. So I'm going to try to schedule a few for this year. So how this is going to work is there will be a slide that says my transition story, and then after that we'll have some tips for what parents can do. And by parents, I really just mean, parents, mom and dad, or any caregivers, or anyone who's supporting you through this transition period. So the first thing is grade school. So what do I mean by grade school? Grade school is kindergarten through 12th grade. So in grade school, I mentioned earlier that I didn't get diagnosed with autism until I was 18, so I did not have an IEP growing up. However, I did still have autism, and there were things that I did that were helpful, and there were things that my parents did that were helpful. So I did graduate from high school with a diploma, but I had a lot of struggles along the way. I struggled to concentrate in class with a lot of people there. I struggled to take my time or take tests in the allotted amount of time. I struggled socially really bad, didn't have a lot of friends, and didn't always get along with my peers. However, my parents were really empowering. So my parents taught me how to advocate for my own needs. And so I would ask teachers, hey, I didn't finish my test in time. Can I come back and take it at a later date? Or the school I went to had like a study hall. And so during that time, we could meet with teachers. So I would go to the teachers and ask for extra help on the class materials that we had been working on. My parents also, whenever they saw that I was struggling, told me, hey, if you're struggling, you need to let us know so that we can get you a tutor. And so that's exactly what I did. In most of my math classes, I had a tutor, and they helped me learn the material and give me that one-on-one attention that I really needed. And then I also had a class, it was a geometry class. It had so many students in it. I mean, we didn't have enough desks for all the students. So some were sitting on the floor in the back of the school, or in the back of the class. And that really stressed me out because being around a lot of people is difficult for me. And it also makes it really difficult for me to concentrate. And so I, kind of got up and just started pacing in the back of the room. And, the teacher didn't call me out. She didn't say anything about it until after class. And then she was like, hey, Emily, like, were you okay? Is everything okay? And I said, I really concentrate better if I get up and move. And she was like, oh, okay, no problem. Well, then do that. So that's what I did. Every class, I got up in the classroom and I paced. And I made 100 in the class because I was able to do what I needed to do to be successful. Now, I was really lucky to have supportive teachers. I was really lucky to have parents who believed in me and taught me how to do these things, how to advocate for myself. Um, and we'll touch some more on what parents can do on this next slide. Another thing that my parents really did that was helpful was teaching me independent living skills as young as 5 years old. So, I was doing my own laundry, doing dishes, taking out the trash, learning how to manage money. And my parents taught me these things, and we worked on them over time. I didn't just wake up one day and, my parents showed me how to do the dishes and then I did them perfectly every day after that. No, it was a learning process. But, they gave me the space I needed to learn, and that included the right to fail. We'll touch more about that on the next slide, but they didn't they didn't rescue me every time. So if I had $20 and I wanted to blow all of that on a video game, they let me. And then whenever I wanted to buy something else later, they would tell me, no, Emily, you already spent that money. And they didn't buy me that extra thing. That helped me learn to budget my money because I blew it all. And then from that, I learned, hey, if I save up, or hey, if I allot money for different things, then I will be able to get what I want. So, those are just some things that my parents did that were really helpful. So what can you do? So the biggest thing is the students need to know about their disability and how it impacts them. So that is really important. I didn't know about my disability. I knew I was different, but I didn't know why. And that was due to just not having a diagnosis because my parents, didn't want me to have a label. But looking back in retrospect, I wish I would have had a name for it. And I wish that I would have known how it impacted me so that I would have been more empowered. Thankfully, I'm a very introspective person. And so I was very good at knowing what my strengths and weaknesses were, but not everyone is like that. So, pulling your student aside and saying, hey, you're struggling with this math because you have a learning disability and sometimes your brain flips things around. Or, hey, you're struggling to make friends at school because you have autism, and that's not a bad thing. And showing them what they are good at too. So it's not just focusing on the negatives, but also focusing on, what they're good at, because a lot of people with disabilities are really good at coming up with outside of the box solutions because we have to. And so there's one strength right there. The next thing is empowering your student to lead their IEP. So this ties into the first one. Your student needs to know about their disability and how it impacts them so that they can do things like leading their own IEP. And, we have lots of resources on that. So if that's something you're interested in, contact us. But, the student needs to be in control of the services that they're receiving. Obviously, you're there as a parent to guide them and give them advice, but ultimately, we want them to be making the decisions so that they can better succeed. And it'll help them once they get to college, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So then we have empowering your student to advocate for their own needs. So letting your child speak up and maybe prompting them to. Sometimes my parents, I'd want them to order my food for me at, the Taco Bell, and they would say, no, Emily, you need to do that. And so they were empowering me to get what I needed. So that didn't mean they would just be like, no, Emily, you do it, and then walk away. They would say, hey, what do you want to order? And I'd tell them, and then they would say, okay. So you go up to the cash register and you say, I would like this, please. And then you hand them the money. And so they were empowering me. So then we have to start teaching independent living skills as young as possible. So cooking, cleaning, budgeting, all those adulting skills are ones that they need to learn, and sooner rather than later. If you need help with that, that's literally my job here at Able is I teach independent living skills to youth. So, if you need help with that, contact us and we'll totally help. And then the last one is allowing your child to fail or make poor choices. It's safer for children to fail and make poor choices when they're younger than when they're older. I mean, would you rather your child blow 20 bucks now or get a credit card and get $2,000 in debt later on? So if we let them make poor choices or let them fail when they're younger, the consequences are a lot less than when they're an adult. So I don't have a child, so I don't know, but I can imagine that watching your child fail is not the easiest thing. But it's really important to their growth because sometimes failure is how we learn. So then we're going to talk a little bit about college. So I started college with my autism diagnosis because I got it the summer after I graduated high school, but I didn't have any accommodations. My professor in one of my classes did tell me about my accommodations and was like, hey, you should go to Student Disability Services and get accommodations if you need them. And so that's what I did. So when I was working on my bachelor's, when I was going to college in person, I got extra time on test. I got extra time to get to class. And then I got to take tests in the testing center as well. Then I decided to switch to online school because that was a better fit for me. And so I, again, had accommodations, extra time on test, and then I had written and captioned lessons because I found that with my autism, if I could read what was going on, I would retain the information better. And then now that I'm working on my master's, I get extra time on tests, a recording pin, ability to leave class as needed, caption videos, stuff like that. So what can you do to support your child in college? Be there as a support, but don't take over. Honestly, the student disability services are not going to let you take over. You can try to talk to them, but honestly, unless your student is present and your student wants you to talk to them, they're not going to talk to you. So, this is a time where you have to start letting go. The transition period is a time to start letting go. So if your student lives at home, start the process of being hands-off with their affairs. So what I mean by that is, let them handle their own cooking, let them handle their own cleaning. Don't handhold them through every assignment unless they ask you to. They really need to start, trying to do stuff themselves. Now, that doesn't mean that they do everything by themselves. That means that they are the ones in control. So if they ask you for help, you can most definitely help them as long as they're asking for help. We just don't want to assume that they need help and try to take over. Then we're going to encourage students to register with the Office of Student Disability. You can encourage, you can't register for them, but do encourage them to because accommodations can be really helpful. But at the end of the day, if they decide they don't want accommodations, that is their decision. Refrain from contacting professors and faculty. Honestly, they're not going to talk to you. So empower your student to do so. So if they maybe miss an assignment and want to see about making it up, instead of you contacting them, why don't you sit down with them and work on crafting an email to send to the professor from the student's account so that the student is getting the practice of, practicing communicating with professors. I do want to mention that college is not part of transition for everybody, and that is also okay. We'll talk about volunteering and work and stuff like that too. So, don't tune out just because you think this doesn't apply to your student. So the next thing is volunteering. So I started volunteering at a camp for kids with autism called Camp Talk. I started as a peer mentor, and that position actually led to employment for me. And I was hired on as a camp counselor the following 2 years. The same thing at Able. So I started out as an EQUIP volunteer. EQUIP is the young adults program, and I started out volunteering, and that led to me being employed as the EQUIP coordinator, and then led to my current position that I hold now. So kids can start volunteering with a parent at a young age. So that's something that you could, encourage your student to do, is to start volunteering now, so that they can eventually volunteer alone. Which it doesn't have to be alone. If you enjoy volunteering too, you can be there too. But we are trying to push for that, more independence. So if your student doesn't want you there, then that's okay too. So the nice thing about volunteering is it teaches professionalism, and it looks really good when you go to apply for scholarships, and it can lead to employment. As you can see, the two places that I volunteered, I did get jobs with. So it doesn't always lead to employment, but it definitely can, and that is something you can put on a resume. So encouraging your high schooler to volunteer is another thing that would be really helpful. So then we talk about employment. So I was employed at a couple of different places. I worked at a toy store for a little while whenever I was in high school, and that was a good first job. My parents told me, hey, Emily, you're 16, you need to get a job. And so I was like, okay, how do I do that? And so my parents helped me fill out applications, and they drove me to the places that I needed to go. They didn't go in with me though. They said, hey, you need to go in and ask for an application. This is what you say. And so that's what I did. I went in and I said those things, and I got an application. I went back to the car, we filled it out together. And then I took it back in. And then about a week later, I called them and I said, hey, I just wanted to hear about the status of my application, words that my parents had given me. And, that's how I got my first job. Then I decided to work at Palmetto Autism Interventions. And the important thing here is connections, because I knew one of my neighbors worked at there. And so she kind of helped me get that job. And at the time, I didn't know about workplace accommodations, so I left that job because I was starting to have issues with my ankylosing spondylitis, and I didn't know about accommodations, so I just thought, oh, I can't work then. So about 6 months after I left that position, I started my own business, and I made employment work for me on my own terms. I didn't know about accommodations, so I thought I couldn't work anywhere. So I just decided to start my own business, because then if I needed to take a day off, I could, and it wasn't a big deal. And so I started a tutoring business, and that ended up working really well for me. So then I found Able, South Carolina, and like I said, I volunteered here first. So I then got the job, and I found my passion. This is what I really like to do, and this is the place where I can make the biggest impact. And for me, that was really important. And at Able, I found out about workplace accommodations, and so I requested some. So I get, like noise canceling headphones. I get meeting notes. I get written instructions. Those kind of things that empower me at work. And so what can you do? You can encourage your young adult to get a job. You can assist with filling out job applications as they need. If they say they got it, then let them do it. Practice interviewing at home. That's one thing my parents and I did. We did role play. They would be the employer and I would be the person trying to get the job, and we would practice, and then we would talk about, what I said good and what I should improve on. And that was really helpful. Talk about professionalism, how to dress, how to behave at work, how to send emails, those kind of things. Start talking about that now. Please don't go to the interview with them. That makes them look really bad. And then please don't call the potential employer, because again, that makes them look not responsible. And we want the employer to think they're responsible, because they, should be. And so empower your youth instead, and then empower them to use accommodations if needed. So if they need an accommodation, sit down and help them write the letter to request accommodations. But if they don't need them, or they don't think they need them, then that's okay too. So then we're going to talk about moving out. So I moved out whenever I was 19 years old, I was 20. I moved out when I was 20, and I got a 1-bedroom apartment, and I lived alone with my emotional support animal. That's what ESA stands for, named Tucker. And that was really good. I developed a closer relationship with my family because I started to appreciate the things that they had done for me a lot more. Um, and also, we weren't at each other's throats all the time because I wasn't there. And, I could come and visit as I pleased, but I wasn't there all the time. Then I most recently got a 2-bedroom apartment, and I lived there with my fiance, Cameron, and Tucker, and our cat, Rain, as well. So some things that I use at home that are helpful are visual schedules. I have a schedule of how to get ready in the morning. I have a schedule of what I need to take with me before I leave. Those kind of things are really helpful to help me remember. I use calendars. I have apps on my phone. I have paper calendars, lots of different choices there. I have a Google Home that I can ask, what does the weather look like? Do I need a jacket? What time is it? When should I leave for work? Those kind of questions. And then I most recently got a housekeeper to help me. My executive functioning skills aren't the best, and so I don't always remember to clean, and when I do, I don't always do a great job. So I'm hiring someone to help me with that. And yeah. So what can you do? So you can walk beside your young adult as they start looking at places to move in to. So you can help them research places, go with them on the tours, assist them with making a budget to see what they can afford, strategize with the young adult what assistive technology they might need or what help they might need to be able to move out. So the last one that we're going to talk about is medical insurance and insurance. So this is really important with students with disabilities because oftentimes we see a lot of doctors or we have a lot of doctor's appointments or stuff like that. And so my parents made me talk at doctor's appointments. So after I turned about 13, they stopped talking in doctor's appointments. They would remind me like, hey, Emily, don't forget to mention this, or they'd help me write down a list of what I wanted to talk about. But when we were there, I was the one doing the talking. And, I also don't want to think that if your child doesn't talk and they use communication devices or sign language or something like that, that's still communication. So having them communicate, it doesn't just have to be talking. But then when I turned 18, my mom made me call the doctor's office to set up appointments. She made me call insurance to make sure that everything was right. But she was also there to help me. So she would make the call with me. She wouldn't talk during the call, but she'd sit there with me. And she might, whisper, oh, hey, don't forget to mention this or something like that. But I was the one making the calls. And then by 19, when I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, I started going to doctor's appointments alone, but I would take notes and then I would discuss it with my parents afterwards. So they were still helping me, but, I had that independence. Another thing that's really cool is you can sign Hipaa releases because just like college, doctors can't talk to you if your child's over 18. And so if you sign a Hipaa release, then they can. And so I would sign Hipaa releases so that my parents could help me if I needed it. But it was also my decision to sign those Hipaa releases. And now my parents, because of the empowerment that they have done, I handle everything on my own now. Occasionally I'll call my mom and be like, hey, I'm not really sure what I should do. And she'll talk it through with me. But for the most part, I do everything myself. So what can you do? Let your child communicate with the doctor. Empower them to make appointments and stuff like that. If they need help, then help them. But slowly and gradually start to step back, and then remain as a support if it's needed. So the last thing I want to talk about is this transition graph. So as they get older, so as the age goes to the right-hand side, the independence we want to grow. Right? So if you notice on the left-hand side, they're still really young at this time. So they're going to, need a lot of help. But as they enter this yellow stage, that's in a yellow box in the middle of the graph, that's that transition phase. So their independence is growing as they get older. But I want to emphasize that independence doesn't mean that they don't ever need help. It is okay to help, but we want them to be in the driver's seat. We want them directing the services that they need or the help that they need. So I just thought this was a cool visual representation of, what transition looks like. So again, if you have any questions or want to talk to me or anyone else, just contact Able, South Carolina. Again, my name is Emily Beasley, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Don't hesitate to reach out, and have a great day.